So take it away, Dave and Becky.
Hey, guess what? This is Dave and Mecky's Shiny Side Out on WCCR, coming to you from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. That's the place that's home to fresh, unfiltered ideas and conversations in the chat room, and also a great place to get your merch. This is show number 542. Mecky would say 240 and 500. You can catch Revolution Radio on air or online or anywhere, even including your smart device. That allows you to be anywhere. So grab an app to listen, or you can go straight to the website and listen from there. Or you can sit at home, relaxing, and maybe in a rocking chair, listening on a Grace tabletop digital radio. If you didn't know they exist, they do. 10 years talking about it, still not one. Calling out you, Grace. You need to give me one of your radios. If you miss Solaris' show, it's okay. You can grab it from the archives. The archives are free. Just jump in there. You can download the show in the format of an MP3. Remember those? Remember before? I don't know. Before all of the streaming services hid the technology behind it, we used to know them as MP3s. And the shows are stored there. So you can listen to Solaris' show. So tonight she had Fred Richards, MUFON investigator, on the show. And a great show it was. She always has great shows, great guests. And, I'm proud to be on the same network as Solaris. And love out to you, Solaris. Now, if you don't know who we're talking about, jump in the archives. You can get her shows, our shows, or any of the host shows. And they go back a couple of years. Look, it's not the full history of everyone's shows because it'd be crazy, right? It'd be too big. But certainly, it's the way to binge. So if you want to listen to what's there, you can just jump in there and do it. Look, Mecky and I stream our stuff live to YouTube as well. So if you're listening to this on YouTube in the future, maybe you're not getting it live, but maybe you're listening to it post upload. Well, it's okay. You can still go to freedomslips.com anyway, and you can catch up with it there live. One day you'll find out when it suits your time zone. You can jump in, listen live. Or if you don't, you'll find other hosts talking about other things on the station. Actually, it's a really cool thing. Now, I called in initially. It's just a caller. I was listener, like, what does my Bart say? Long time listener, first time caller. He says, well, I did that on This Blue Monkey, TBM's show back then. And I was just trying to answer a question that was posed there by the people. And I did, and Nighthawk pulled me aside after I'd said my bit and offered me a show. And immediately he said, I said, well, hey, just hold it up. I'll pitch you something, and then you say yes. He replied back immediately with a yes, and voila. Then I called up Mecky and say, we've got a show. And he goes, what? I said, no, we got a radio show. It's in the US. Let's go. And he goes, oh, absolutely. So it's been more than 10 years now. This is the 11th year that we're in Revolution Radio, and proud to be here. Yeah. So thank you very much for the listening public who have come and gone and stayed. And it's, we see a percentage of people change over time. We've had a lot of hosts that have also passed away in those 10 years, and a lot of guests that have passed away. I'm not going to name them now, but there's an RIP page there at the bottom of the schedule, I believe it is, or on the homepage. Anyway, because the archives are free, jump in and download what you want and binge it. And if anyone out there is able to discover some of our early shows anywhere else, I don't care where it is, please let us know, because there's a couple that we're missing because, they were deleted from YouTube or whatever. And that's really bad. We'd love to be able to try and find them. So if anyone can find them, I don't care how you find them, as long as we can, dig them up like paleontologists. Now, the welcome to country is a thing, a tradition that we uphold here in Australia, and that is recognising the traditional custodians of the land. And for me, it's the Darkinjung, sometimes the Bungalung, when I'm up the coast. And for Meki, who is still offline, I don't know what's gone wrong at his end, but I was speaking with him, sorry, and messaging him earlier, and now he's just disappeared. I don't know what's going on. He might be having troubles with his computer or his internet link. But Meki lives in the Daruk people region, and Meki and I both pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Now, having said all that, and I know that was a long preamble for today's show, but bear with me. Meki isn't with me at the moment, and I do expect him to alert me to his presence soon. He's been joined into the call, so if he gets his machine up and running, he should be sweet to join. And nobody there in the chat room, please, feel free to stay. What is it they stay? What is it? It stings, it bites, or whatever. It zaps, it bites. Yeah, I understand. It shouldn't be Dave alone for another 2 hours. Just saying, Meki should join. He wrote he updated the show notes for today, and in the second hour we're going to be talking about false flags. That's really important. I think right now we have a heightened awareness of what may or may not be a false flag, and the current geopolitical climate is worsening. It's like a weather situation. It's worsening. It's not getting better anytime soon. But what I want to do, I'm just going to take us straight into some news. And one thing that I found was from yesterday. Sudden adult death syndrome. Let's hope that Meki hasn't succumbed to SADS, which they tell us through a bit of astroturfing that it's been around for a while, but really the terminology only came about because they were trying to explain or hide away the all-cause death numbers that rose by 40% in some countries recently from last year. And we don't know. And they've just named it sudden adult death syndrome, and they've made that disappear now. Oh, look, we named it. Don't have to worry about that anymore. It's got a name. You got to worry about it when it doesn't have a name. It's like meningococcal. Meningococcal is spread unknown. How? Don't know. What does it do? It can kill you pretty quickly too. You just feel like you've got the start of a head cold, and then suddenly you realize on some part of your body you've got like this purplish rash, and then that's the end of you. And that's all it is. It's a bit of head cold, a bit of rash, and then And there was a poor fellow that was at the Splendor in the Grass concert. I believe that was the name of it. And I hope I'm not wrong. In Byron Bay, which is the northmost part of the eastern state of New South Wales, right on the coast. It's near to where my dad lives. And one person died as a result of contracting it. Not sure whether that person had arrived there with it or not. It's usually rather swift. And then the sad state was another person became infected. No one knows yet how you acquire it. It could be just in the soil. We don't know. And it was really rainy and muddy. And so people would have a lot of contact with, because it's cloudy, there's no UV light. There's so many ways to avail yourself to be able to come in contact with something that was there. And maybe it is there, maybe it isn't, maybe it's some completely different thing that we don't know about. I don't know. Anyway, so that's a sad state. That one person's died, another's in hospital, and they're looking for other people and making warnings now to say, look, if you were there and you've got any odd symptoms, please seek medical attention immediately. And that's really important that you do that. But there's one story that came up was US B2 stealth bomber caught up in mid-air scare in Queensland. This was yesterday. And there's another story I want to talk about yesterday as well, which I watched kind of live on YouTube, streaming straight from the helicopter, but I'll get to that in a minute. And this was really weird because I wasn't aware that Australia had B-2 stealth bombers in bases here, because they're not ours, and they're still owned by the US and operated by the US. And I think under some bizarre agreement, which I've not been able to find yet, that there it is. It's there. There is. They had 3 of them take off from Amberley Air Force Base, which I've got on a map here for those people on YouTube. So the Amberley RAF base, that's the Royal Australian Air Force Base. And it's kind of just at the back of Brisbane, Ipswich, Amberley. It's right. I mean, it's right at the back. It's part of the ring road around Ipswich, and yeah, that's just. I mean, it's basically the first city above the border, because I've got Byron Bay shown on the map here, and Brisbane just past the Gold Coast up there, and Amberley is here, isn't it? That you got to admit that that's really close to Brisbane, Ipswich, and I can't remember if that's 5 kilometers. So, there's no, in this version you don't get a way of measuring a distance, but yeah, it's not that far. Maybe 20 k's out from Brisbane is Amberley Air Force Base, and it's right in the back, smack bang in the middle of it. And so what happened was they had an incident in the air, and the incident was something to do with the flight characteristics of the B-2, and they called out to the air control, and they asked them that they needed to land again, and they just taken off pretty much. And as a result, the pilot announces that they're going to do a fuel dump in order to facilitate the recovery. So rather than a fuel dump to minimize the fuel to land with less fire at the end of the crash, to adjust the weight of the aircraft, because normally they take off with a huge fuel load, and that they can't land with that fuel load, is what I've discovered. So they had to do a fuel dump in order to modify the gross weight. It says, this is what the pilot says: we also plan to dump fuel to get a safe gross weight for recovery. And that's really the landing component of it. And then the next phrase is, what services do you want? And they said, we won't be requiring any services. Yeah, we won't need any emergency services. So they managed to land the aircraft having done a fuel dump, and that was sufficient. Look, I think that's really important to note. Number one, my surprise that we have B-2s here. But then I did something really interesting. I looked to see what the possible, this one. So I looked to see what the possible range is in nautical miles. So it says 6,000 nautical miles, which is 6,900 miles. And that's because of the curvature of the Earth, or that's equivalent to 11,000 kilometers. However, when I had a look at a bit of a Google Earth view, and those people on YouTube will be able to see this, and that is Taiwan up the top, and roughly whereabouts the base is down there. It's only 3,500 nautical miles to Taiwan. And thinking about what that might mean for anybody, it means that a 6,000 nautical mile range, which could mean that you could take a payload to Taiwan or thereabouts, and fly back with a refuel before you landed. I think that's really important to note. So I wanted just to bring that out. I know it doesn't mean much to anyone and no one really cares. Yeah. But the significance of having air bases here in Australia that would then be targets of, say, an enemy is an interesting factor, knowing that air bases would be a prime target. They'd certainly be a high value target if I was an opposition to us. So I don't live anywhere near an airbase that can take jet fighters. I'm kind of halfway between everything, luckily enough. So if they were targeted, I would be kind of safe. But yeah, knowing that good on ya. So nobody in the chat room has posted. You've got to go to the chat room, by the way, and you can talk to us while we're on air. And that's what nobody's doing right now. And he's showing me an image of Krusty the Clown with the battery in one hand. This was from the episode where he was broadcasting out of the emergency broadcast system. And he's in one hand he's holding an old car battery, and the other he's got a pair of tongs holding a scorpion. And he's attempting to electrocute the scorpion with the car battery by putting it across the terminals. It's very funny. It comes from like him being on air for such a long time, with just him on air, no one else, and there's no script, and he's just ad-libbing, and he picks up all these items to attempt to do that. So at least I had prepared. In my defense, I prepared something about the B-52, completely expecting Meki to be on board today. But I've SMS'd him, and I don't have a reply back, and I can't see him online. I've tried to add him to the show, and I'm not really getting anywhere with that. So sadly, we'll just have to see what happens. And I tried to call him as well, but it's a shame because I really needed Meki on the show today, because he's done some great show notes, which they're kind of important. It'd be interesting if he's attempting to entertain people. Thanks, nobody. We'll just see. No, Meki's still unavailable. That's a shame. Let's hope he joins us sometime a bit later. Now, there's a certain risk with what was I talking about? Military bases, yes, blah, blah, blah. Look, I'll move on. So the other one that I thought was extraordinary, and this is the one I was watching live, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And that was Anne Heche. So Anne Heche was involved in a high-speed crash. Well, it's not alleged, because it's quite clear that it's her, and she appears to have been badly burned in the car crash. So my estimation was she was allegedly doing down like a small suburban, very narrow, cars parked on either side, not a very wide road. She was doing maybe, and eyewitnesses said 70 to 80 miles an hour. But it's evident from what I could see that she was doing greater than 20 meters a second. Just think about how fast that might be. It could be 40 meters a second, which is pretty fast. And she was flying, and she reached the T intersection, but with so much speed. And there's no evidence of any correction of, she didn't try to alter her direction using the steering wheel, and she plowed directly at the T intersection into the street, into the house immediately opposite her at the intersection. And luckily there was no injuries in there, but the two-story house has been been burnt. It may be a full demolish and rebuild, but it was there from, I think, more than 30 years, that bungalow. A fire took hold of the building. The car exploded in flames, and it was a small Mini Cooper four-door. It looks like a wagon, like a Mini Cooper wagon, but it's a four-door. And the fire was a number of appliances at the scene. I think I've got an overhead shot of something like it. No, I've got a trimmed down version of this. So what I'll do, I'll show you this in the middle screen, so you can find the clip yourself by the description. But the occupant who's being put into the ambulance sits bolt upright and then starts to fight with the people. I thought it was a guy when I first saw it. I wasn't aware that it was Anne Heche. It's later been described as actually being Anne Heche in the vehicle. There's a shot here of a door cam, and the vehicle zooms straight past, and there's not much left. The car's pretty ruined, and it looks like it's suffered some great fire in there. But yeah, extraordinary. So just to believe the story initially, and now it's been confirmed that later people have shown video evidence that she'd crashed into what looked like, to me, it didn't look like an apartment block car park. It looked more like, rented, when you rent some storage. It kind of looked like that. There was no numbers on any of the doors or anything, but one of the garages, she kind of negotiated incorrectly and hit the corner of it. And then she was questioned by some people, and there's a photograph of her with a vodka bottle in the drink holder. It's all alleged. No one knows whether she's consumed any of this, but the speed she was going, she's clearly upset about something, and because they weren't normal actions or behavior of someone. So she had a little car accident without injuring anyone, and then she nearly killed herself. I don't know what was in her mind at the time. I do remember the SNL sketch that they played where she says something in intelligible language and then says, "That means I'm not crazy anymore," in my native space language. And that was played by Reese Witherspoon. Very funny segment. And my kids recognized the name Anne Heche from that Celebrity Jeopardy parody. I thought that was extraordinary. That's good on you kids. And they go, "Is that person there?" I said, "Well, no, it's not the person who did the parody, but apparently the people in the anchors because I found a number of live streams, and they were all talking about it actually being Anne Heche, and that was a big surprise. So it kind of looked like the car had been stolen and was certainly being driven like it was stolen. But look, I hope that if it is Anne Heche, that was truly her, that she makes a full recovery and is able to document this in some way or speak to the media so that we could all maybe, understand what was going through her mind at the time. Maybe there was a fault with the vehicle and she was just lucky enough to steer it. Yeah, I don't know. I just wish I did know. Now, there's some prompting from the chat room, which is, what it's all about here on Revolution Radio. And that is to talk about Taiwan. Now, Taiwan has started a military operation. Sorry, Taiwan. China has started a military operation around Taiwan. And it looked as though that was in reaction to Pelosi, who was, there and about to depart, and her plane was escorted by Taiwanese Air Force to kind of, strafe the path if required to get out. And I thought initially that that's all that exercise was, and then China launched a missile that landed into into Japan's economic region around itself. It launched a missile over the top of Taiwan, but it wasn't intercepted by, anti-missile defense systems. It was just let fly, and it landed in the ocean on the other side. Now, I've got a lot of friends of mine who are jumping up and down and waving their arms like the robot from Lost in Space, saying, "Warning, Will Robinson." Yeah. So what does it really mean? Is my thoughts are that this, and it's been described, I have to say this, it's been described in our media in Australia, and specifically by the ABC news station, their 24-hour news, as a blockade. Now, whether it is really a blockade or not, I don't know, because if I type that in, blockade Taiwan, and it's really hard to talk with any cadence. Yeah, so China simulates blockade. It simulates the blockade, is what it says. Wow. Let me just get to a point where I can see it on the screen. Red threat rising, says, what is it, Fox News? Well, that's no surprise. Let me see if I can get an image up. There we go. So for those of you on YouTube, you get to see it. And I'll see if I can make it bigger. There we go. So the red areas are the no-fly zones or no-ship zones. Now, a friend of the show said that ships eventually started to diminish. The ship count in those areas diminished over time, and that's good. That means people are taking it seriously. But is this the beginning of a blockade? It's spoken about as a simulation of a blockade, but is it really going to result in the actual blockade? And I don't know. I just don't know the answers. It's possible, but maybe it's not. Maybe all this is too soon. Meki and I and my friends talk about this as it's way too soon. For all of this, it's too soon for the WEF's Great Reset, because we don't have robot automation. We don't have any government willing to give a living wage to people. In Australia, they hate the fact that people are getting any money from the government. So this would just play in the hands of everyone who's a hater on the government. I think the first government to do it is going to take the most grief. And then you're going to end up with this, branch stacking thing where you're able to pay all those people in a swinging electorate a living wage, and then they'll vote for you at some point during the election cycle. Yeah. So if you had a whole region that wasn't going to vote for you, and you give them all money, you give every person money as a living wage, they go, oh, these people are great. I've got to change my mind about them. Maybe that's what it's going to take. Maybe it'll take an election cycle. But right now, there's so many things that are too soon. Setting all these crazy targets for climate relief. Is every country that's signing up to this ready? Well, apparently not. No one's ready for the climate change or anti-climate change resolutions. Can we really do 43% by 2030 as CO2 reduction? Can we really do it? Probably not. What power? Because in Australia, we either have gas or coal-fired power. We don't have any nuclear power here. So all of the power we have, the hydro is a very small amount of power input, and so is solar and wind. I mean, it's extraordinarily small. Just thinking about as a percentage of coverage of the nation, it's extremely small what they actually produce. There's like Australia has one of the greatest adoptions of own roof solar, but it's solar to grid, and you don't get to use it. It's just supplying the grid. Then there's those people with rooftop solar that have that are offline. They're good for you. And then there's those who also have a battery, so that you can power that and power your house when there's no sun. And a lot of people don't live the same kind of life that we do now. Just like power's cheap, you wait till it's not cheap. I mean, it isn't free, and it is going up. And coal went up something like, crazy, like 300, 500%, just in the last 2 months, because, well, let's just say they wanted it to go up. It's really all we have. So they call it baseload power. Everything else is the ribbon on top of the present. And that's what I think is really hard. So we don't have the ability to be 100% renewable for our power generation. We have a lot of things that could contribute to it. Like if you say you just chose a part of the coastline that no one lives at, and you dug a huge trench to a huge inland lake, and you made it all pipes, and you made those pipes feed a turbine, and use tidal power. So as the tide rises, it fills the inland lake, and then as the tide drops, the lake empties back into the ocean because water's going to find its own level. Then you could do that, and that would be good, but it wouldn't be enough to power everybody. And the amount of water would be crazy, and you don't want to slow it up too much because then you won't get the effect. So you can't have too much. It's like trying to utilize the turbines in a water course. So the great conveyor that takes water up past Florida, up the eastern coast of the US, up to Antarctic. Sorry, up to the Arctic. If you put big turbines under the ocean, they'd work for a year, 2 years. They'd slow down that effect so much that then that effect would pretty much be cancelled. You would no longer have all that nice warm water going up the east coast, keeping the east coast warm, and it wouldn't then shift and do the melt, and then you wouldn't get that nice fresh melt water. There'd be a whole bunch of problems that would result of that, and then we could see stagnation of the whole ocean conveyor across the entire planet. Therefore, England could freeze, the US could freeze. Think about what that could cause, and that would be disastrous. They talk about once you stop the conveyor, then the water heats up and cools down in its own regions, and the conveyor just doesn't start the same way anymore. You could see huge changes in that. Okay, so we get to that point. Next, the use of nuclear power for power production. So nuclear power production. Well, we've got bans in Australia. You can't put those in. We'd have to overcome that to be able to get that done. In Germany, it's okay. We've got enough solar to deal with everything, and then Russia turns off the gas. Oh, but we turn all our power plants off, and now we've got nothing. Oh, well, can we turn the power plants back on? Sure. It'll take a while, but how long? Probably longer than the season to get it all up and running again, because you're going to maintain it now. As you turn it off, you can't just turn them off, and you can't just turn them back on. It's like if there was an EMF across the planet, there wouldn't be any way to turn power back on, because you need power to generate the power to start the power. And it would be hideous if there was huge, EMP. What's Melia said? US promises to defend China's neighbor. On a visit to the Philippines, the top US diplomat also spoke about protecting democracy and precious maritime resources. Sure, always have to fight, always new wars. Why can't the US just stay away from Asia? Interesting. It's a really interesting point. What I'll go down this path. If you had a country like China right now doing drone strikes on leaders of groups it doesn't like, what would you think? You know, if let's just say, I'm not advocating for this at all, but if a drone came across the horizon and took out any head, I don't know, if it was the Zuck, then that would be something. If they took Biden out, or Kamala or Pelosi with a drone, like their equivalent of a Switchblade drone, which is what happened to that Al Qaeda leader killed this week, how would you think? What would your feelings be towards another country taking out someone in your country? I just wonder. I wonder what you think about that, because my concern is, just because it's our team doing it, does it make it right? I wonder. It's a good question to ask. Now, I had a conversation today about all of this going early on the Great Reset, going early on turning all your power off, your coal-fired power, just to look green. Maybe China goes early on Taiwan, just maybe. I'm not saying they're ready for it, and I know I've had a conversation today with one of my friends who's a fan of the show, or at least bears to listen to the Stingy and what is it, Zappy show. When I'm all by myself. But this is the thing. With what we could be facing, I suppose is the best way to put it, with what we could face really quickly with a conflict, geopolitically, dance around who's going to take on the planet next, who's winning will rewrite history to make themselves look fantastic. Okay, that's always the outcome. Is this reach for power right now the ability to decide who's global digital currency and who's going to be the global dominating power? Is that what this is right now, just because the WEF said we're going to introduce a global digital currency? We need a one world government. We need all this stuff. We need a stakeholder economy, which means only the large corporates, and by the way, they're not Chinese corporates, they're only US corporates. They're the Facebooks, the Twitters, all the big players are the stakeholders. They have the most amount of clients. They also provide the most amount of telemetry to that governing body. Think about that. But it's what it did was it designed a world with the West in mind, not the East. It designed a world where the East didn't even get a look in about what it was going to all be about. Imagine the single power base of having one world currency and a one world government, but I don't mean an elected government. Democracy, who cares? That's I'm being facetious. When you have that much data on every single person, you give everyone a living wage because it doesn't matter anymore. You just type numbers in, and there's no exchange rate between countries anymore. It's just one huge place with one currency. You can't affect anything. There is no effect on your exchange rate, so your country is better or not better than the others. By giving everybody a certain amount of money for not working to just not even, because there's okay, the one world government and World Economic Forum's view of the world with the Great Reset was designed for when robots take over human jobs, and we'll still have a bunch of humans that are then not employable because there's no roles for them. All the world we left behind, I think, is the greatest thing we should be looking at right now. It's what we should be considering. What was the world we left behind in the future? Remember the pre-2001 9/11 times when authors would just come on the morning show and talk about their things, and we didn't have a global financial crisis, we didn't have too big to fail at this point, we didn't have obviously 9/11, we didn't have terrorism, we had a burgeoning society with endless limits. There was no end to anything that could happen. You could just be anything, you could make it, everything that we dreamt of we could have. And then it was all changed. And then GFC came. That was the tech bubble. The tech bubble was before that. Then GFC was all the banks being evil to each other and trying to offload all their junk and basically bankrupting themselves and requiring a bailout from the government using your money. All of those disappointing things led to us then being in a perpetual war, and all those negative aspects of what we never had. I mean, we never had that in, say, January of 2001. Right? We just celebrated 2,000 years. Yay. And then suddenly everything just went dark. Everything went dark. My big worry here is that democracy will not give up anything to a communist country. It's not going to want to lose to communism. So whether it's Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea's bid together as their team, the rest of the world's democracies, and Meki, if he was here right now, he'd tell me that I'm being silly because democracies are long dead. What we have now is fascism, because fascism, in a way, because the big pharma, the big oil, the big military industrial complexes, big finance, they control what the government does. Before, they used to react to what the government did, and now they're like the hand up the puppet, up the puppet butt. That's what is controlling our government now. You may as well have governments in sponsored uniforms with all the big logos all over them, like NASCAR drivers. That's really what's going on. Now, I don't want to touch any of the virus rather than to say that it looks like Australia's coming off the Omicron 0.5, which is good, slowly declining. And if you haven't had it, it's only a matter of time before you will get it, even with all of the things that you put in place. And I do hope that there are some of you out there who are listening who have not gotten the virus. And if any of you out there aren't vaccinated, who haven't got it, then we'll see. You need to be included in the number as far as watch what happens to the people who were vaccinated, and to those people who were vaccinated and got the virus, and to those people who were vaccinated didn't get the virus. There's 4 groups. So you weren't vaccinated, or you were, and then the 2 subgroups are you got the virus or you haven't got the virus. They're going to be really important, I think, for statistics coming up in the future. And I don't believe there's going to be many people who weren't vaccinated and didn't get the virus. That's going to be something else to see. I can't wait to see it because, there's, like I said earlier, the all-cause deaths are going up and everyone's scratching their heads going, oh, I don't know what happened. So how many of those were attributed to things unknown at the moment? It's going to be a matter of time before we see that. Now, back to to Taiwan and China. My guess, I had a feeling. It's only a stupid feeling, and I can't say it's a premonition. I had a feeling August was when everything's going to go bad, going to go pear shaped, and I don't know why I feel that. I just have a feeling, and when people ask me, I just kept getting the word August. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. I'm not saying I'm not a mind reader, and I'm not, seeing the future here. I'm no Ed Dames. I just don't know, because right now everyone, there's not just China and Taiwan. And my friend and I were talking about this also today. That there are a bunch of countries in the world who are all waiting for something to happen so they can start their plans. And this is that opportunistic view of conflicts. I know that Israel is sending missiles into Gaza, and the media that I am within the bubble of suggests that is because of rocket strikes from those locations into Israel. And that's all I can say. I can't say anymore. I know that Turkey was being aggressive. I know that Saudi Arabia is being aggressive to a neighbor. There is, I think China also expanded, put a freeway or something in the disputed zone between India and China. I think there's aggressive nations out there right now who are kind of, I think, sitting there waiting. I think Serbia was the other. I forget the country that used to be all Serbia, and then that got cut in two. There are a number of countries whose beef with their neighbor is now coming to the boil. Now, I've said this in the past, and I kind of think that the Mayans' description of us going into the dark rift is not specific to us crossing the galactic plane, which a lot of scientists have presumed, because they kind of marry up, and it kind of makes sense. But maybe this is, when you look at a sine wave over it, and you draw a line through the middle part horizontally, and the sine wave's horizontal as well, that there's a portion below the zero and there's a portion above the zero. And you can call it zeros and ones if you wanted. But when as the curve is above, everything's good, and when the curve is below, everything's bad. And the Mayans talked about the dark rift as being this middle part, and then after that, it's just hell in a handbasket. That's not their words, I'm paraphrasing. Is this the thing that we're seeing right now? Is all of this the same, and the same cause and effect? Are we seeing this? Because there doesn't seem to be any geopolitics, which, apart from deciding whose team you're on, which is kind of a positive, is at least people of like minds who are getting together. But is this really what we're seeing? Because are we seeing this perpetual baby steps in the negative direction? No geopolitical speakers anywhere on the planet are talking about how wonderful everything's going to be. No one's saying that we should be making inroads to solving all of our conflicts right now. Let's not do the conflicts. Let's just solve them. Yeah, if you want part of our land, look, we'll just give you some of the land, right? Don't kill people as a result. No, nothing's happening. You can't imagine that Russia and Ukraine are having positive communications at the moment. I mean, the battle's still on. Sure, Ukraine pushed back Russia in the Donbass region in a small section by 7 Ks. Sure, using America's, the contributed weapons. Let's think about that. So with only, let's say, not the top notch stuff, but maybe N-1 or N-2 weapons who aren't, everything to everyone today, because you don't want to give everything to Ukraine. because that seems like the consensus across the world. We'll give you some stuff, but we won't give you our A-class gear. So if you had like a laser weapon or a single shot pistol, they're giving the single shot pistol to people, not like the laser weapons. And I think that's really what we're seeing. I think we're seeing this right now, is that even the N-1 weapons seem to be having a good effect towards Ukraine's cause and pushing back Russia, which we thought and who's advertised that they're like, God-fearing. No, that's the wrong word. You should fear us. Fear me and kill you, right? I know that's a terrible accent. And I'm sure I've got some Ukrainian history in my family way back, and that's really bad. I got electrolytes. Oh boy. Society is progressing. Yeah, just like idiocracy. The people themselves are becoming less intelligent. I completely agree. And geopolitics is only going into the negative aspects. No one's trying to make it better. And I think that if you look down the line of the Great Reset and the Georgia Guidestones and the Agenda 21, we're just plowing. We're all in buses heading towards the same conflict. Only a certain amount of us will make it. It's 500 million. That's what the Agenda 21 was all about. I still don't know what they're going to do with the Georgia Guidestones. Right? Did they just simply delete a single language off it? Because every one of them was like the stone that had all the languages with exactly the same phrasing. So you could, if you knew one of the languages, you knew what the message was. But if you were looking at all the languages, you could work it out because you knew one of them, and you could determine all the other phrasing on the others, and you could work out some other country's languages. So, what was that called again? Someone in the chat room, let me know. But we've only got 2 minutes left, and no Meki in the first hour, which is kind of scary, and he hasn't even replied to my text, which is unusual as well. Anyway, this is Revolution Radio. I'm Dave, and Meki sadly isn't with us at the moment for some unknown reason. Hopefully he can join us in the second hour. But I'm going to ask you, because this is listener funded, could you please make a donation to the station in any way, shape or form? I know they have a Patreon. I know you can send them checks and you can do the EFTs, and I don't know, you can't do NFTs, but you can set up, something to, just subscribe. I think it's like $1 a month. I don't know how little the Patreon is. It could be like $5 a month or something. You can just become a Patreon. Help the station, because none of the servers are free. They have a cloud service now rather than being hosted in a garage. It's kind of really stepped up, and I'm looking forward to seeing that, you guys have made a difference. I think we made the numbers for last month, and I'm really hoping that we can continue to do that, because we do this for free. We're not paying people. We're just paying to have those the lights on. And there's the music. Now, use the break to donate and go to the toilet, and we'll see you back pretty much right on the bang smack, top of the hour for the second half of Shiny Side Out with David Meki.